Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Free Thought Forum put on by the Pennsylvania Nonbelievers. I'm your host for tonight, Jacob, and once again I'm joined by Doug.
Greetings, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
And tonight we Fields joining us as well.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to begin the show by giving a few reminders of a bunch of upcoming events, so I'll turn it over to Doug for that.
Okay, these are the upcoming what they call them, table events. First one coming up is on Saturday, July the 16th, and it is the Chambersburg Old Market Day in Chambersburg Square. And we will be setting up at 7 a.m., so if anyone wants to come and help us set up a booth, please do so. Like that. And the show, or the fair closes at 4 p.m. Also, in July 30th, Saturday, we will have the Central PA Pride, and that will be at Riverfront Park in Harrisburg. Also, they will be setting up at 8 a.m. and close at 6 p.m. In August, we will have the York Equality Fest in Penn Park. And set up on that is a little bit later. It's at 10 a.m., but the whole show closes at 6 p.m. August 13th, Saturday, we have the Red Lion Street Fair in the Red Lion Square in no other place other than Red Lion. You guessed it. August 21st, Sunday, we will be doing the Pride in the Park, Lehigh Valley, at Cedar Beach Park. Oh, it's in Allentown. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see it on the thing there. So anyway, also our next Free Thought Forum will be in 2 weeks on Tuesday, the 26th of July. And the same bat time, the same bat channel. And back to you.
All right, thanks. And definitely consider coming out to Chambersburg this Saturday. It's always a good time out there. They stick us in the nonprofit wing of the event, so we're pretty much surrounded by churches. You've been there, Shannon?
Yes, it is always a lot of fun. We always get a lot of mixed reviews in Chambersburg. A lot of people coming up to say, "Hey, we're really glad you're here," or be like, "Hey, why are you here? We don't like you. Go away." So yeah. It's a lot of fun. I definitely encourage everyone to come out to that event and all upcoming events. It's always a great time, great people. We're looking forward to see you there.
Yeah, and I think as long as we're getting feedback both ways, it feels like it's worth keep going out. Because we have multitudes of reasons to be there. It's not just show support for especially closeted atheists, and then also to challenge believers, and also even if they don't change their mind, at least maybe we can dispel some misconceptions. Because I don't know if you went to church a lot growing up.
I grew up in church. I grew up going to Trinity United Methodist Church, which is a pretty ritualistic sect of Protestantism. There's a lot of, it's by the book. You have a schedule. You follow the schedule. You stand up when they tell you to stand up. You sit down when they tell you to sit down. But
you said Methodist, right?
Trinity United Methodist.
Okay, that's why they call it Methodist, right?
Yeah.
Methodist, yeah.
Methodism, and just being there was always just kind of a. I didn't always enjoy church growing up, but I tried my best to get into it. But now I haven't been to church in over 5 years, and I'm really happy about it. So there's that.
Pretty much the same here. I grew up in a fundamentalist Protestant. And there was always a lot of like real negativity towards atheists, humanists, especially secularism. For some reason, they really demonized secularism more than anything else. And I think most of that was because of the straw man that they thought atheists were people who knew that God exists but were just in rebellion, but you were still using God as your starting point. Whereas secularism, you're building a worldview with just completely apart from any notion of God, which is why sometimes I find like some of the use of the word secularism to be problematic, because of like how my church viewed it growing up, and it's
Right.
very different than the way we use it.
The last time I went to church, I was maybe 14, 15 years old, and just so happened that I had just come out as an atheist, but I went to church with the encouragement of my mom wanting me to go to church, and it just so happened that day that they were talking about atheism, and they were
Okay.
talking about atheists, and it was just such a negative worldview, just saying they're unhappy, they need to be brought to the light, they need to, they're going to corrupt our youth, this, that, and the other thing. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, these people have known me since I was a baby,
Right.
and they've seen me grow. And I just remember wondering to myself, how would they react? They would probably see me as not the person that they knew me to be, and I just always thought that was
you'd
funny.
be the person that's been fooling them all this time.
Right?
Like that, you're evil.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Now,
no,
you see, I was brought up in almost a total religious vacuum. My father, although he never said he was an atheist, he was an atheist. He was a non-believer. My mother, I think that she sort of had a belief, but she fell in line with my father. The only time that I really heard anything about religion is when the Mormons and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the Watchtower Society and all those people came to my house and tried to convert my mother, but I just sort of sat there to protect her against the evil Mormons and everything. But she was never converted, and fortunately I wasn't either.
My dad loves door-to-door Christians. They're the best things in the world to him. He always, if he can get it by my stepmom, he invites them in and he sits them down to talk to them, which, as you all know who know my father, that's always a really interesting time. So the door-to-door concept for him is really funny, and he gets a lot of amusement out of it.
Yeah, because her father, when you get a discussion about religion with him, he sort of, he traps you. He throws out his line, okay,
Not
and gets
just
you
with
talking,
religion.
and reels you in, like that. And then all of a sudden, here's the coup de grace. Boom, he's got you.
yeah. You're talking about door-to-door. I recently had someone leave a pamphlet on my doorknob. I think it was my Living Waters ministry, which was, I think, Ray Comfort's thing.
Love that
And
guy.
I looked at the pamphlet, and the first thing was in big letters. It says, "Don't waste another moment." I'm like, okay, throw it away.
That's good advice.
I'm like, at least they told me that at the beginning.
Right.
Yeah,
5 minutes you saved
Yeah.
yourself out of your life.
yeah. Like it reminds me of like in one of William Lane Craig's book. Deep in the book, they're like, he says, if some people hold crazy ideas, you should just ignore them. And somebody looks at that and goes, now he tells me.
I think it's so funny because on the back of my car, if anybody's seen the back of my car, there are a couple bumper stickers. And my favorite game is stopping at stoplights and then watching the reactions of the people behind me. But I cannot tell you how many times I've parked somewhere for school or for work or something like that, and I get those pamphlets. And one of the biggest things I remember from high school, when I first came out as an atheist, this was early on in my high school career, and I was probably the only out and loud atheist in the school. I just remember I had atheist friends, but they just kept to themselves, and they were like, I don't really care about the Christians. I don't really want to argue with them. I don't want them to know I'm an atheist. And I was like, that's fine, but that's just not who I am. And so I remember I used to get all these tracts in my locker. Sometimes kids would hand them to me in the halls. I found actually Bible verses taped on to my locker a couple times. And I just always thought that was really funny because everybody knew I was an atheist and they wanted me to convert, but they never actually stopped and had a conversation with me because they knew that I would be a good old Brian
Outspoken.
Fields spawn, and I
And-
would.
In that respect, too, I have a great deal more respect for Christians who do actually go out and talk to people.
Right, who come up to you and actually question you, challenge you, and I think that's more admirable than shoving tracts in lockers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I've known a lot of atheists say it doesn't bother me that they think that I'm going to hell. It bothers me that it doesn't seem to bother them.
Right? That is one of the worst things too, because I've had people tell me I'm going to hell, and I always stop and I say, hang on a second. I do this to people who yell this at me in the street too. Just hang on a second. Do you realize the gravity of what you're telling me? Do you realize that you are telling me as a stranger or even as a friend that I am going to burn in torture and agony for all eternity?
You have judged me rather than God.
Right.
You know.
And it's like, do you want that for me? And then normally they say, no, I want you to be a Christian. Yes, but if you really cared about me, you would accept me as I am and question the fact that someone as good as I am is going to hell. Why wouldn't you question that?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that's absolutely. And I remember there was one guy I talked to at I guess it was the Anvil Memorial Day Parade, where I had a bit more respect for him because he was a lot more informed on the topics than most people. It wasn't any arguments I could handle, but it was still like a lot of times you'll get like the really vague arguments that could be used for any god in the world, or like where do morals come from, or what if you're wrong, but he was actually presenting a little bit more informed material, the kind of things you would find in more like the bigger apologetics today. Like I don't know if you've ever read The Case for Christ, but it was more or less the arguments out of that book. Although it's kind of sad that I know exactly what book he's reading out of, if he by what apologists they're talking about.
Well, that's the thing about it, though. When Christians come up to you to talk, I'm not saying that Christians are dumb in any respect.
No.
A lot of them are very intelligent. The thing about it is, though, you always realize that they're using the same arguments over and over again because it's the arguments that their priests tell them, or something that they found online, but you can see it happening as you're watching them, as you're talking to them. You can see that brainwashing, kind of in the sense that they say the argument to you and they think, that's it, that's done, I've won the argument. But they don't expect you to come back and say, but do you realize the flaw in that?
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of the point I got to with the person in Anvil was the line that kind of ended the conversation was, I asked him, well, if I don't believe in Romulus, why should I believe in Jesus? And that's when it kind of ended. And I was actually impressed, though. He actually admitted that if he was born in India, he would probably be a Hindu. I was amazed he actually was able to admit that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I use the geography argument a lot.
But yeah, I mean, I usually use the arguments from religious plurality a lot because mostly because that was what really got me away from religion. And I bring this up sometimes when one of the things that was a big part of my deconversion process was the fact that on our way to church every Sunday morning we had to go by 5 other churches on the way to the one we were going to. And it's even funnier in hindsight when I look what those churches were. There was a Mormon church, a Pentecostal church, a Seventh-day Adventist church. So it's not like, just simple variations of what I was going to. It was major differences in which sect of Christianity we were going to.
And everyone thought they were right, and they were the only one.
Right.
All right. But one of the big things we wanted to talk about today was last week was the grand opening of the Ark Encounter project.
Yay!
Yay! And we have some pictures of the enormous crowd that showed up on opening day. Just look at that parking lot. If you have the pictures up. Okay. Yeah, the parking lot and the queuing lines, they're just stuffed full of people.
Staggering.
There's the parking lot.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
It was pretty.
Look at that.
Yeah, the attendance was pretty dismal for opening day, and some part of me wonders how much. I think there were a couple thousand people who made it to opening day, And
I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not surprised.
yeah,
I am not surprised at all because anybody who I mentioned the Ark Encounter to had no idea what the Ark Encounter was.
yeah,
And I think there's just wasn't, and not to do Ken Ham's work for him, there wasn't enough advertising, there wasn't enough publicity. He could have done better with that. He,
Oh, yeah.
Probably the biggest number of people there was, Jacob was saying earlier, were probably atheists just to come there and look at it and
I saw
laugh.
so many great videos. Aaron Ra was there.
Oh, yeah.
I think David Silverman was there. Just so many great guys
yeah.
showing
I think
up.
David
to,
Smalley did his podcast there.
Did you see that Eric Hovind was there?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't surprise me, but what did he do?
I didn't watch the whole video, but Aaron and Eric got into it a little bit.
I think that was at the Reason Rally.
Well, no. They were at
Oh,
the
okay.
Ark Encounter too. The Reason Rally was fun, but
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and watch that because I'm sure that was fantastic. But yeah, just so many great atheists showing up to talk about the Ark Encounter and to expose what's going on there.
Yeah, and we've talked about this in more detail, but I'll just kind of in other episodes. But I'll just kind of rehash why the protests are there. There's a few reasons for it. One, it's in the shady way they secured funding for the project. The actual Ark Encounter business entity is a for-profit entity. They did this so they could file themselves as a tourist attraction in order to get government benefits, which they couldn't otherwise if they were a nonprofit, especially a religious nonprofit. The problem is they're very much a religious organization. There's a very, very, very much a religious overtone. Secondly, there was discriminatory hiring practices. What they were doing was they were actually trying to use the Answers in Genesis nonprofits so they could discriminate against who they hired and then have them work for the Ark Encounter.
Yeah, you had to swear that you were a Christian. And
Right, yeah, you would have to sign their statement of faith. You would have to be a Christian. I even heard a report that unmarried people had to sign some sort of like abstinence pledge or something like that.
I did hear about that.
Yeah, it was, but yeah, there was a lot of, like, it was very religious discriminatory hiring practices, which for-profit companies cannot do. But, especially if they're receiving government benefits, and that's a double whammy there. So what Answers in Genesis was doing is they were trying to play both sides of it. They were both trying to take the benefits of being a for-profit company and a non-profit company, which could actually jeopardize the non-profit status of Answers in Genesis or jeopardize the funding for the Ark Encounter project. But actually, it's possible that the Ark Encounter project will not see $1 of those incentives because they also have to meet attendance requirements to be to maintain their tourist attraction status. And the thing is, the Answers in Genesis estimate for attendance was somewhere like 2 million.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, like,
so they're really in dire straits.
Yeah, they were like 2 million a year is what they wanted. More conservative estimates from like more independent agencies were looking at like 200,000 to 300,000 a year, maybe peaking at 5,000 in a couple of years, 500,000 in a couple of years before it fizzles off.
So, Jacob, what happens if they don't meet those attendance requirements?
Well, I think they lose. Well, I think the government, from what I understand, the government benefits are coming in the form of tax rebates, and I think they would lose those if they fail to meet it. If you want more information about this, the blogger Dan Ariel has been following this extensively. His blog is called Danthropology,
Okay.
like anthropology, only with Dan at the end.
It's a pun.
What's that?
It's a pun.
Yes, we were talking about puns a little bit before the broadcast went on. If you're wondering why that was funny, yeah, but yeah, it is a pun or a binary term. I can't remember what the name of it. Anyway, but yeah, it is a bit of a pun. But yeah, Dan Ariel has been following this extensively. He was actually the one who called out Answers in Genesis for their discriminatory hiring practices, because he actually went on their website and found a job posting that was quite clearly for the Ark Encounter project, but with all these sort of requirements of like be a Christian, etc.
So, to my knowledge, the Ark Encounter is not completely finished yet. Is that what I'm led to believe? Like,
Yeah, there's a couple of buildings that are not finished yet, and yeah, it isn't finished yet in its entirety. I'm not sure exactly what all they have to go. In fact, they did the project itself is a lot smaller than what they originally tried for. And in fact, I think Answers in Genesis is now the only company that has a stake in it now, because what they were doing was they were trying to bring a whole lot of companies together, and actually that was problematic because some of those look like shell companies, but when they failed to meet a lot of fundraising expectations and goals, quite a few of the other people who were pledging money for it pulled out and decided like this looks like it's not going to go anywhere. But Answers in Genesis was pretty much all in on this right now, and you were saying they should have publicized it more. I think Ken Ham's debate with Bill Nye was supposed to be the big publicity stunt for it.
That does make sense. The other thing about it, though, is that when you think about the Ark Encounter, and you have to wonder, would kids rather go to Disney World or the Ark Encounter?
That's the thing. It's like something like the Ark Encounter, to me, you can't put it in the same league as like an amusement park or like, as a stadium and arena. It's more like a museum.
Yeah, it sounds like something that in second grade they would have made me go to. It's just, that's what it reminds me of. I remember when I was, well, that's the thing, that when I was in school, during the summers, my mom would send me to a child care program in town, and it would be held at the high school or whatever school was going to let them do it that year, and we would go on field trips kind of like that, but the other thing about it, there were religious overtones to the program. So now as I'm older, I don't know whether or not that program was completely legally sound,
Right.
but I do know that we did take a field trip to Sight and Sound. And that was, we did take a couple field trips up there, and those were, I mean, don't get me wrong, Sight and Sound puts on a brilliant production.
Oh yeah,
they
and
really
for
do.
those of you who don't know, it's a theater. Sight and Sound Productions is a theater, a very professionally done theater that it tells biblical stories.
Yeah, and they have live camels walking up and down the aisles.
It's
rotating
very
stages.
like you were saying, it's very, very well produced. But I just wanted, in case people didn't know what Sight and Sound Theater was.
And going there, I mean, it was one of those things where it was like, yay, we're going to Sight and Sound, but at the same time, as a kid, you don't really think about it. And so I'm wondering if Ken Ham was trying to elicit that same kind of reaction. But I'm not. But I mean.
Well, in that respect, the FFRF is keeping an eye on it and actually sent out reminders to these school districts saying do not take field trips to the Ark Encounter. Essentially, the FFRF has been very proactive in terms of cutting that off before it starts.
Yeah, you got to nip that kind of stuff in the bud, because once you let a school district start doing things like that, it is extremely difficult to get them to stop.
Right.
And that's coming from personal experience.
What's that?
And that's coming from personal experience.
Yeah, and I think, and that's part of it. I think that's one of the reasons they went ahead and just put up as much as they could of the project to begin with, to try to fill it in later to see if they could get them. Again, if they really were expecting that many people, I guess they figured they'd have enough money in a couple years to do everything that they wanted to.
Well, it's not looking that way, does it?
Yeah. But that leads to the other major objection to the Ark Encounter project is just what it's trying to teach kids and what it's the anti-science that's being promoted by the Ark Encounter project, and how if you look at creationist material, a good bit of it will focus around Noah's Ark because they seem to think they have evidence for it. They'll say, well, we have all these fossils all over the place, or they'll try to point to various parts of the geological structure that they think supports the flood, but it really doesn't. Even though floods would produce like a lot of fossils and such like that, you would expect a certain formation to the fossil layer. Well, actually, it's rather no formation, just everything pushed together. But even like in the early days of paleontology, they couldn't help but notice everything was in its own layers as sequentially. And and that observation was coming from people who went out trying to prove the flood.
And right now, Answers in Genesis is on a project or several projects, and what they're trying to do is they want to first actually determine the kinds of ark that were possible that it could be built. Then they also want to make an initial estimate of the kind of birds that they had on the ark. Then they want to estimate the total mammals that were on it. Then identify the kinds of snakes that were on it, and then identify the ark turtles and crocodile kinds. And and they go on, and I was thinking, I thought that they had already made up that story, but it looks like they're starting over again.
Yeah, it almost does, and you can, and I don't know. Like growing up, my parents were creationists and fed me a lot of that material, which is why I was surprised when when Ken Ham debated Bill Nye, that a lot of that material went missing in that debate.
It's like, Ken Ham, you have so much evidence. Where is it?
Yeah, exactly. And I remember there was a lot of people following that debate were like, Bill Nye did okay, but I can't believe Ken Ham showed up with nothing. And I went into that debate expecting to hear a lot of the things I did as a kid. And I'm sitting there, where is it? Yeah.
I remember I was watching it with my dad. Well, this was the second time he was watching. It was my first time watching it, and it was around the beginning. Maybe we were 10, 15 minutes into it, and I looked at my dad and I said, so when's Ken Ham going to provide evidence for creationism? And he looks at me and he giggles, and he literally giggled, and he goes, he's not, Shannon. He's really not. I'm like, then why am I here? But I did watch it because I'm a good atheist and I do that kind of thing.
They've actually, I've noticed Answers in Genesis getting more and more presuppositional. And like when I was a kid, they were very, very, they didn't use those types of arguments. They were trying to be very evidentiary in how they do it and try to show proof of concept of everything they were trying to argue for. But in the debate, even in the debate, Ken Ham fumbled at the presuppositional argument at one point. And I even have been doing like I've been personally blogging about writing a response to their book about contradictions in the Bible, and in their introduction they actually pulled out the presuppositional argument to say that there are no contradictions. Like essentially, you can't know what a contradiction is if there's a contradiction in the Bible.
Yeah,
I'll tell you where the Ark Encounter fails. The Ark Encounter fails in the sense that what I've noticed is that a lot of the Christians that I run into in my personal life, they are living their Christian ideologies based off of what you might read in a children's Bible. Yeah. That knowledge is what people pull forward into their adulthood, because once they read the children's Bible, they say, that's it, and they move on, and they just go with whatever priest tells them. And I think that the Ark Encounter fails in the sense that when people go back and they read these stories and they see the holes, and I know people that say, yeah, I'm a believer, but I'm not really into all that Bible stuff. Yeah. And I don't think that those organizations realize that or Christians more so, are starting to reject the Old Testament in an extreme way. Yeah. And I feel like that may be an optimistic view of what Christians are doing nowadays, but it's what I hear most often. I remember when I first met my boyfriend, he said he was a Christian. And I said, okay, this may not be a long relationship, but we'll see what happens. But what had ended up being is we sat down and I said, well, do you believe that Jesus Christ was born, he died at the cross for your sins and all that? And he said, well, I'm not really sure. I'm not sure about the Bible. And I said, well, do you believe in Jesus? And he goes, well, not really. Okay, do you believe in anything that happens in the Bible? No, not really. So are you a Christian? Because if you don't believe in the Christian ideology, then you're not a Christian. I said, so maybe you're a deist, or maybe you're a universalist. And now after a year or so of being together, he has come to the atheist conclusion. But I think it's that extra push because a lot of Christians are just starting to reject the Bible.
Right. It kind of reminds me of Julia Sweeney in her stand-up, Letting Go of God. It's like she was saying, I've been getting lazy. I wanted to get back in it and kind of have a grown-up understanding of what the Bible was all about. And 3 years later, she was an atheist. It's just, and that's the thing. It's when people do tend to just get the sweet Sunday school version of stories. Like that's what I love so much about one of David Fitzgerald's talk is he's like, let's talk about the book of Ruth. Now, first, I'm going to give you the Sunday school version of the story. Then I'm going to explain what all these euphemisms actually mean.
One of my favorites, my dad was telling me a story a couple weeks ago about how he wanted to tell a woman about the story of Jephthah.
Oh, yeah.
That's always fun. But, it's that lack of knowledge there. And like I said, Christians are not dumb. But I find that I meet more Christians that haven't read the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
More and more every day.
And more atheists have read the Bible, and that's probably why they're atheists.
And it's funny because that is a running joke in our movement, but it is true.
Yeah.
It's just the facts of life because we are humans, we are intelligent beings, and we have rationalization, we have logic. It is innate in us, and when we're presented with knowledge that goes against everything that we've been taught, we are classically trained to reject it.
Yeah.
When
ask questions.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that was another thing that was a big part of my deconversion process was I would say I was a naturalist long before I was an atheist. If that makes sense. It was just like I started to see the world very much in terms of cause and effect over the long run than anything supernatural going on.
Yep.
And that I think that kind of helps me look at biblical stories and see, okay, there was probably some sort of kernel of truth to these stories. Like Noah's Ark, there was probably some sort of local flooding that led to the story. Yes. I think we discussed that in much deeper.
Well, I think you're right because there's pictures out there that say the entirety of the Bible happened in this circle. So to those people, if there were a flood that disastrous for them, that is their world.
Right.
That is what they understand is the place that they live in the world.
If the Black Sea broke its banks and flooded everything, then as far as they're concerned, that was everything. That was their world.
Right.
Exactly, because of that isolationism that happened at the beginning of the world. If there are tribes in Africa that we still haven't discovered, and to them, that patch of land is their world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and who are we to...
And they were saying people who live in the jungle their whole life, when they get out of it, they have no sense of distance recognition. Mm-hmm. Like they'll see something on the horizon and think it's small. They don't think it's like it's just appears small because it's farther away. Mm-hmm. And that's and it kind of also reminds me of another story of the Christian apologist Josh McDowell will talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, and they think they found the site for it. And he said, it looked like it has an earthquake happened here and might have, ignited some underground gas. Yeah. And I'm sitting there like, okay, an earthquake igniting underground gas, destroying a city in a highly superstitious time.
Yeah.
Right.
And especially if you objected morally to maybe what they were going on there.
But did they happen to find a pillar of salt anywhere in the neighborhood?
No, that would be a little bit more. But I kind of look at that and go, that sounds exactly. Imagine if Hurricane Katrina happened before we understood hurricanes.
Right.
Yes.
Evangelicals would even more be, yelling that it's God's punishment on a sinful city.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But we understand all of that now and have the scientific basis.
And we're going to continue to understand things. I think eventually we won't have any supernatural beliefs. I think eventually we'll grow out of that. Kind of like Star Trek.
Well, I hate to say this to you, Shannon, but I said the same thing 50 years ago, and I have been greatly disappointed.
Well, that's the thing, though. When human development, I mean, it might take more than 50 years, but we no longer believe that if we sacrifice humans, that the sun will rise tomorrow morning. We now know the sun's going to rise tomorrow morning. And if it doesn't, then there's an explanation for it, and that's something that we understand now.
Then I won't sacrifice you. So
well,
I
thanks.
can
That's
know
that's what I'm kind of hoping for.
Yeah.
Hey, if I haven't been sacrificed today, it's a good day.
Yes.
Right. Well, I mean, even back in the 1950s, there were already medical reports coming out showing how homosexuality was perfectly natural. But we've made a lot of progress in that time, but we still got a long way to go as far as, well, not just homosexuality, but the whole concept of sexuality in general. How sort of loose. What's the word I'm looking for? Lucid, maybe not really, but just kind of how hazy it can get sometimes. Where it's not. Well, I should say it's not gender. The idea of gender binary and binary sexuality is a concept that we need to get rid of, and people started to realize this in the 50s, but it took us a long time to get to where we are. But if you look at the cultural shift in the last couple decades, it's been dramatic.
Right. And we will continue to have cultural shifts, and that's how the society works. I remember in school just talking about how things that happen in the world have a dramatic effect on what happens even on a individual standpoint. Just look at how music has evolved in the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
When it was the 1950s, we were beginning rock and roll. It was the beginning of sexuality. It was beginning of, we were just getting out of this terrible war, and it was a time of pretty much, there was a lot of prosperity. And then we got into the Vietnam War. There was a lot of music criticizing the government. There was a lot of music criticizing the war. And just everything is interconnected. And as long as we continue to keep making those strides developmentally, we'll get there.
Right. It's one of those things, you can't be perfect, but you can always get better.
Exactly.
And I think that's one thing is when it's easy if you only look at how far you have to go, it's easy to get pessimistic. But if you focus on how far you come, it's easy to become complacent. So you kind of have to be a balance. Okay, this is what we've done, and this is what we still need to do.
Right.
But just look back to the old movies, if you want, back into the 20s and the 30s, like that, and see what they considered dancing.
Exactly.
If they was to show what modern dancing is, they'd go out of their mind.
Yeah.
That's, it's almost pornographic. And,
I don't know. Have you ever been to a high school dance? It's pretty much porn.
Yes.
Dirty dancing.
Exactly.
Dirty dancing.
I do that. But one other thing I wanted to show about the Ark Encounter project is they actually have a pen in the Ark Encounter project with a raptor in it.
A raptor?
Yeah.
Now I need to go.
But it's
I don't want to give the Christians my money, but I want to go.
Yeah. But it's one of those things. It's like I remember Seth Andrews talking. We was talking about the Creation Museum at the time, but he's like, this whole exhibit is done with a straight face. But of course, it's not scientifically accurate because we now know raptors had feathers. But I would love to see Answers in Genesis actually depict a dinosaur with feathers.
Oh my goodness. I'm sure their minds would implode.
Yeah. Even though more and more fossils have turned up with feather impressions, or I think the raptor in general, they showed the arm of it has the anchor points for the feathers along its arm.
When they start putting dinosaurs in Ark playsets, that's when I'll convert.
Okay.
That is my terms.
Okay.
But I'm also a liar, so take that for whatever it's worth.
Yes, you amoral atheist.
Exactly.
Okay. But yeah, and that's the thing is we can even I think even some of the T-Rexes they found have avian-like breathing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it's more and more piled up. Okay, that's definitely where birds came from. I'm like, well, there you have a bird. It's in the dinosaur, but
Well, that's a very common reaction, though, because even when you provide them with the answers that they're looking for, so I've had arguments with Christians where I've given them my position, and then they end the conversation by, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. And then when they walk away, they're still a Christian, and even though they agree with me fundamentally as to why I'm saying why I'm an atheist, they just choose to completely disregard all of it and continue to believe what they're going to believe. So I feel like it doesn't matter how much science we throw at them. They're so into it.
Lucky you, because when I end a conversation with my dad, he just starts projecting.
Oh, well, parents are different. I remember when I came out to my mom and my dad are divorced. When I came out to my mom, she wavers. She's pretty much whatever religion suits her at the time. So sometimes she's a Wiccan, sometimes she's a Christian. Depends on what she's feeling that day, really. But her argument there is that we're all worshiping the same thing. There's a God, and we just call it different names. I'm like, okay, Mom, and I just leave. But when I came out to her the first time, when I told her, Mom, you know what, I'm an atheist, and she got so mad because it wasn't the fact that I was an atheist, it was the fact that I didn't believe in something.
Yeah.
She was like, you have to believe in something. I'm like, well, no, I really don't. And it took her a while to get her to stop inviting me to church, too, because I remember the last conversation we had before I moved out about going to church. She was like, why don't you come to church with us? I said, Mom, because I'm an atheist. Well, other than that, I wasn't aware I needed another reason. Oh, well, come see your grandfather. Mom, we live a block away from Pop-Pop. I can go see him on a Tuesday. And on this Sunday, I can sleep in. So it was just, and that was the end of that.
That sounds a lot like Julia Sweeney when she was like, she tells her parents and they're like, this doesn't mean you stop going to church, does it? Well, of course, she was Catholic, where that's probably more important to them than actually believing anything.
Yeah.
And then, they actually flipped out because they're like, atheists, it was one thing that you didn't believe in God anymore, but an atheist?
My,
came out first as a secular.
Yeah.
right.
And we accept that. But when she came out as atheist, they actually banned her. They wouldn't talk to her for weeks.
Yeah. When my grandfather's been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and so when he was first diagnosed, he was in and out of the hospital, and he was in and out of Holy Spirit Hospital. So I had no problem walking in there trying to go and see him. I didn't burst into flames or anything, but I remember I went in the one day, and the pastor from my old church was there, and it was hilarious. Because apparently my grandfather had missed communion that morning. Yeah. And so he brought communion to him because that's considered a nice thing to do. And so he and his wife were there, and I'm sitting there, and they offer my grandfather communion, and I'm just kind of quietly sitting there like, you know what, Pop-Pop's a Christian, this is what he wants to do, I don't care. Right. But then the pastor turned to me and was like, so would you like me to offer you communion? I was like, nah, I'm okay. Because before I left the church, the pastor before him served communion and didn't really care whether or not you had completely accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior. Now, when you go to that church, if you're going to take communion, he says, don't come up here if you haven't accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, or we'll mug you. I'm pretty sure he doesn't say mug you, but that's kind of the feeling I got. Yeah. So the last couple of times that I went, I stopped going up, and my mom was like, you realize everybody's looking at you, right? I'm like, well, Mom, stop bringing me to church. That's really the only thing you got to do. Right.
Yeah, it's, I can't say I've ever had an experience like that, although growing up, I felt like, looking back at my growing up, I'm like, did I ever really believe it?
I don't think I ever did.
No, at least I don't feel like I was ever old enough for the decision to matter.
Yes.
It's like maybe you were just a kid just sort of emulating what everybody else did around you. But as I grew up into a teenager, I'm like, no, I always had my doubts, I had my questions, but I kind of kept pushing it back because I thought I was one of those rebellious teenagers I kept hearing about.
They're pretty common.
Yeah. they always seem to preempt you as far as like, you know,
Right.
oh, you're not really having legitimate doubts. It's this, and this,
Right.
which can make it very difficult to come to terms with.
Yeah.
That you're an atheist. I actually heard someone once say, you don't become an atheist, you just hit a point where you realize that's what you were.
Yeah.
And
I remember, you know, I'll tell you what the first warning sign should have been for me. And that was all the while growing up in Sunday school, people would come up to me and just be like, oh, I can feel the Holy Spirit in this room, or I can feel God running through me, or I can hear God talking to me, or something like that. And I felt the same feeling that I did when my mom would come up to me and be like, I think there's a ghost in the house. This is all the things I'm experiencing. Do you also feel these things? And, you know, I wanted to be like them. And I would always say, oh, yeah, definitely.
Yes, peer pressure, really.
Exactly. But, you know, I never felt it.
Mm-hmm.
I never felt the Holy Spirit. I never felt like I was a part of that community. And while they may have accepted me as a person, I didn't really accept their spirituality. I didn't bring myself to the table there. And I think that was the first beginnings of my doubts, even though I might not have realized it till years later. Because
Yeah.
you're too young to realize that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because you want to be accepted by everyone. So you're like, yeah, definitely, there's God here. I see him. He's right over there.
Yep.
You see him too?
Yeah.
Good.
See the shadow he cast?
Shannon, God's invisible. Oh, I don't see God.
Yeah, right. I smell his breath.
Right. Somebody needs a breath mint.
Or I thought they always give the excuse, well, he's just, if you seek him, maybe he'll show himself to you. And
Or even if you're not looking, he'll just show up. You know, kind of like dating when they're just like, oh, well, stop looking and someone will come around. That's logic. Okay, I'll just sit in my house all day, and one day, magically, when I wake
Someone
up,
knock on the door.
Prince Charming will be right there ready to jump me, and I will live happily ever after.
Well, depending upon how gentle he is, but...
Right.
Doug, I'm glad that your standards there are set.
Right. But that's yeah. There was a lot of that growing up. Where, well, actually, there's one person telling me like, you know, if you're seeking God, he'll show himself to you, and then I'll be like, was Paul seeking God? When, you know, we often go back to the Damascus oil experience where it's like, where he just shows up. And yeah, I remember that, like, getting that growing up, where they're like, they explain like, they give like the standard rationale, but I'm like, yeah, but in the Bible it shows God doing what you just said he wouldn't.
Right. And I just remember reading about praying, and when people would tell me, pray on it, if you're doubting God, pray on it. I always felt kind of silly praying. I always felt just like, I would like sit on the edge of my bed and I would pray and I'd be like, well, I look like a damn fool.
Yeah,
what am I?
You look behind you to see if anyone's watching.
I feel like I'm looking in the mirror and saying Bloody Mary 3 times. Like, is God gonna show up and like shank me in the spine? I'm not sure. What'll happen here?
Yeah, and you were talking about the feeling of the Holy Spirit or presence of God, and I'm like, you know, maybe I felt something during parts of that, but like you were saying, it's like when you start to feel that elsewhere, like, you know, oh, I feel like this, you know, something coming out of this religious song, but I also feel that coming out of a secular song
Exactly.
as well. A very powerful secular song.
That's the same thing. I always tear up when I hear Amazing Grace, especially if it's like.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, when I used to do Relay for Life, and every year at the 24-hour Relay for Life, they would have a lady. Well, she was a couple years older than me. She would sing the national anthem, and she had a beautiful. Not the national anthem. I'm sorry, Amazing Grace.
Yeah.
She had a beautiful voice, and it moved me to tears. I was an atheist at the time, but I still feel that, and I feel that when I hear what's that other one? Any song by like
I
the
like
Beatles.
Hallelujah.
Yes, that one.
Yeah,
that one.
That one actually brings me to tears too.
Well, that's not a religious song, though.
I know,
So.
but it's just the way that it is sung. It's sung almost like Amazing Grace, you know, and it emotes a visceral reaction.
That's the That's the first song I ever learned on guitar, and the tattoo that I have on my inner arm has a dove, and it has Hallelujah, and a lot of people assume that it's a Christian tattoo. And it's actually for the first song I learned on guitar, and the reason why I got the tattoo is because that song is supposed to represent, like, pain, but also serenity and, you know, the hardships of going through life and still coming out on top. So, you know, when you actually get a chance to talk to someone about that song, it's always kind of enlightening for them.
I always originally thought that Hallelujah was a religious song.
Me too.
Until you really start listening to the words of the thing, and you're going, whoa, wait a minute, that doesn't sound very religious.
Yeah.
Like the verse
to
about
me.
sex.
Yeah.
and there's definitely a lot of songs mistaken for patriotic too. Like "Born in the USA," it was is like people think it's a patriotic anthem, but it's actually a protest of the treatment of Vietnam veterans.
Or what's the other one?
Well, there's also "Keep on Rockin' in the Free World," which sounds like it's like was really driving, you know, thing, but if you look at the lyrics of the verses, they're actually very much just talking about the social ills of this country.
I can't remember the name of the song. It ain't me, it ain't me. That's the one that says, like, some folks are born silver spoon in hand. I don't remember what it's called.
Yeah. Red, white, and blue, yeah.
I can't remember the name
Hail
of
to
it.
the Chief. And,
Yeah.
Or I actually ran into somebody who thought the song "Zombie" was actually about zombies,
Oh, God.
when that's actually very much an anti-war song.
Yeah.
We could go on for hours just talking about, you know, people who maybe listen to a small clip of a song and think they know what it's about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
or one of my favorite songs, like growing up, I listened to a lot of country music as well, and
Fortunate Son. That's the song.
Yeah.
Fortunate Son.
Yes.
I got it. Fortunate Son. That's
Yeah.
the name of the song I was trying to
Okay.
think of the name of.
well, fortunately,
Got it. I feel better now.
yeah, there was this one song called "The Dance" where it sounds like it's on the surface it's a love gone wrong song, but actually it's more metaphorical towards, you know, even if it has to end badly, it's better that we don't know what's coming,
Right.
that we can just live our lives to the fullest without, you know, even if we lose loved ones in the process,
Yeah.
you know, we should chase, you know, we should live moment to moment. And I think, you know, we could definitely talk a lot about music, because it's, you know, it's definitely like, you know, there's a lot of powerful religious music, but there's definitely a lot of powerful secular music that,
Yeah.
especially when it's, you know, I think I kind of like, I'm a little partial to the 80s as well, because it
Same.
felt like it was very unpolished, very
Yeah.
very
It was
like
raw.
raw, bearing your emotions.
Everything on the table. You know, that's
Yeah.
the kind of music I like to think I write. You know, laying it out as it is, and just that's what rock and roll is all about.
Right. But I don't know if you have anything else, Doug.
Oh yeah, there is a program on TV, a new program, and it's kind of like a true documentary expose about Washington D.C. and it's happening now in this election period. They mentioned the Donald and Bernie and Clinton and everything else, and it's called Brain Dead, and it's on CBS Monday at 10 p.m. and it really exposes what is going on in Washington D.C. and why all these people act the way that they do. Now, it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek there, but it really is interesting to watch, and you look at it and you go, ha, 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 yeah, that is Washington, D.C. You know, that is a senator, that is, yeah. And this is the way that people act, and this is the way that it's a program worth watching. And also, I'm going to throw one other thing into you, too. Independence Day, the new movie out. If you saw the first one 20 years ago, you'll love this this new one. It's got great sound in the thing. Also, the rendering of the graphics that they have in it is far, far better than the original one, and they even have some of the original cast in it. So
Yes, but does it have Jeff Goldblum?
no.
I'm not seeing it now.
Oh, no, wait a minute. Yes, it does. It has Jeff Goldblum.
Okay,
Yeah,
he better be.
I don't think it has Will Smith, though.
No,
Oh.
it doesn't have Will Smith.
I'm not as upset about that.
Yeah, but it does have this young guy in there that looks like Will Smith, that is supposed to be Will Smith's son.
Oh.
So they sort of get around there. And if you ever remember Data from Star Trek,
Of course I do.
well, he got killed awful, but tooed off kind of nasty in the very first one, and they've got a very imaginative way of bringing him back. Brent Spinner, that was the name I was trying to think of. So, but
Interesting.
anyway, yeah.
Nice.
You
We'll have to check
didn't
that
you
out.
see it?
I saw the first Independence Day movie. I didn't see the second one. I like to think myself as a movie aficionado. I love movies.
Yeah.
They're the best thing that's ever happened to me. But
Yeah,
You
last-
can lose yourself in them.
definitely, I'm really excited. Swiss Army Man just came out this weekend, so I need to go and I need to see that. That's got Paul Dano and Daniel Radcliffe. That's looking to be really good, so I'm looking forward to going out and seeing that.
I want to see Ice Age. That's coming out next week.
Any thoughts on the new Ghostbusters? Or
I'm looking forward to that. A lot of my friends aren't. They're like, oh, well, the original one was better. It's, give it a chance.
Yeah.
It might not be the greatest movie on earth, but it's fun. Movies are meant to entertain.
Who
Yeah, that's-
cares if it's different? I mean, who cares if it's not as good as the other one? But it's different, slightly different story, so it could be just as entertaining.
I mean, it's not like if we get a new movie, we have to throw away the old one.
No.
Like, that's not what they're doing here.
No, that's the thing. I think I've kind of people do take movies too seriously a lot of times.
Well, I
that's
take
why
them seriously, but I also know when it's a good time to stop.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I love. That's why I love the YouTube channel Cinema Sins, where they just go up and just start heckling the movie, or like. Well, actually, Mystery Science Theater was probably one of the better, where they would show you how even a bad movie could make a positive contribution to society.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope they bring that back someday. That was a good little series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, another one, if you gotta rent it. It's out. It's called 13 Hours: The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. That was written by some of the people that were at Benghazi.
For those of us who aren't tired of hearing about it.
Yeah, which they are going to bring up again after the election.
Well, of course.
Like that. But excellent movie, and it'll make you angry at a lot of people. So anyway, I guess that we're winding down to our final minute here, and I'm going to say that it's a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And a reminder: if you want to appear on the show, just contact us, and we'll get you on.
We'll pencil in a time and a
Yes.
place. We'll put you on our dance card.
Exactly. I hope to come back again. I had a good time.
All right. And reminder: we got Chambersburg coming up this Saturday. Always a good time. Hope to see you out there. Next Free Thought Forum in 2 weeks.
Yep.
And I don't know what we'll talk about then. We'll have to see what's going on in the world.
Yep. And please don't bring holy water with you and try to throw it on us, because it'll stain our clothing like that, and it doesn't work. So.